You're working on your spreads in InDesign, let's take a look back at some more modular design examples. Remember that the whole purpose of the yearbook is to cover our students, and coverage is king. We want to make sure that we are covering as many people as possible. So let's take a look. Remember that modular design is really when you just take your spread and you break it up into a bunch of different sub-stories. You have your main story or your feature topic, but then you have sub-stories about different things that might relate to the feature topic and all make a full spread. But the mods allow you to really look at different topics that might affect different students in our school, so that way you are being able to cover more people. It's the newest and hottest trend in yearbook design, and it is popular. You also see this a lot in magazines, so it really resembles what's going out in industry. When we start with a spread, you want to go ahead and have a base layer. And if you would like to turn on columns, you can, and I'll make a video on how to put columns onto your spread so you can really break it down. But you want to break it down into a framework so that you can know where you're putting stuff and how it's spaced out. Once you begin to do that, you want to use a variety of rectangles that will hold content. Now, some of this may be photos, some of this may be text, but by breaking it down and having already, a dominant element portion of your page where it is 2 to 3 times bigger than everything else, you've already broken your page up. And I can almost guess that this is probably the dominant element. Excuse me, and this may be the main story and headline and feature story. So let's see what happens. As you break this down, this is one big dominant element. Now notice this dominant element is not one photo. You can make dominant elements out of multiple things, but then notice how the headline and story got placed near the dominant element so that the reader can follow along. You've then got a smaller mod down here that's obviously about graduation, and then you've got a weak mod down here about other topics. So again, taking a spread, breaking it into rectangles, and then using those rectangles to break down even further what your spread's going to be about. And that's the content layer, what the reader actually sees. So you start out with your base layer of your columns, move to your modular layer of your rectangles, which you can create in InDesign, and then have content placed on top of it, and then remove the rectangles from the background. This allows you to create a layered approach and break it down step by step instead of just staring at a blank page and saying, I don't know where to start. So when we're looking at those individually designed modules, what's great is you can zoom in and really focus on what that design looks like. In addition, it's great that you can also spread out and look at the whole spread as a whole to make sure that everything works together. You can tell that a unified spread has subtle repetition of key modules. So it's really important that the headlines are both visually and verbally unifying the spread. They have the same kind of text style. They are using the same colors. You're not spreading it out so much that people don't know what's going on. The story modules feature mini headlines and photos, and then the photo modules are enhanced by dominance and eyelines. And let's look back really quickly at that spread before. You had colors that were very signified across. Look, the orange and the blue drawing all the way across the spread down here. This bottom area, the purple and the blue drawing it together. But at the same time, you can see that everything has a heading, everything has a subheading, and everything is labeled so people know what's going on. So our step-by-step design is allowing you to be able to really work through a spread and identify the dominant element and move forward. So first, you need to establish the grids if you'd like to use them for that invisible framework. And then all the content falls within that column grid without stopping in the middle. So just work across that gutter. And we use a 12 column grid usually because that's how wide the spread is and it's even. And then the columns are then spaced by 1 pica, which is the standard spacing. And it's kind of like pixels, but it's picas in print is what we use. So I'm going to show you a video on how to get these grids on your spread, but you establish 12 across each page. And when you're working with grids, you can see how easily it can be divided up. And the 12 column grid allows us to really divide it up into a lot of different areas. So when you do 12 by 14, you really have the ability to establish that grid structure and get enough boxes for you to be able to put enough content in here. The next thing you want to do is that dominant element. We've talked about this before, place it, right? Now, the dominant element may just be a box right now when you're creating that first layer of the module design, but you can break it down even further in there. But once that's placed, that allows you to then do the eye line and create a focal point for the spread. So place your dominant element. And normally you'll see a lot of dominant elements tend to cross that gutter. And the reason they do is because that draws the reader into the center of the page so that they want to read all around it. Then you want that to be the eye line. It creates that eye line for you, which is a horizontal alignment for creating some space and drawing a line all the way across the spread so that the user can read. And remember, you don't want to place the eye line in the direct horizontal center of the page. It's better to put it above or below, so that way it actually draws the reader all the way around. So here you can see that this dominant element, the eye line is placed above it, here below it, and again below this, or even above this. You could argue either way with this dominant element. The next thing is to be able to have a strategic plan of where is the headline and the feature, story, or module going to go. It needs to be near the dominant element. So they should be next to each other, whether it's on top of each other, below each other, or side by side. So that way it directs them across. They should be looking at the dominant element, then the headline, subheadline, story, or whatever alternative coverage you're doing, and then around to the other modules. And the columns are then combined so that you can display these stories and captions. So here you can see the story is placed off to the left. We've even added some sub photos with caption, and you have the headline going up at the top with a subheadline. This is near the dominant element. It draws the reader in. You know which direction they're moving across the spread and helps them to read more. Then you start placing secondary photos, and you do this around the dominant element. And remember that you want to have a bunch of contrast. You want to have different size photos, whether they're large or small, horizontal, vertical, square. You want to spread it out and make it different. Not only that, but it's really great to work in the number of odds. And remember that you keep track of that eye line. And if you use the column grid that I show you how to put onto your spread, it's great for being able to actually align things and know how big things are going to be, and to use consistent spacing. So here we have this spread, and we add in like a pull quote up at the top with another photo. We add in more photo packages. Notice the variety. Notice that some are tall, some are wide, some are small. They have captions for every photo, including the dominant photo. Notice that we have a photo here and we have the caption here. And that's great for being able to get great coverage for students. Then we move forward to adding a whole module down at the bottom, which is a Q&A. So as you can see, this really doesn't have more than 2 modules. It has the main story module with all the photos on the side and the quote at the top, probably all about one topic. And then down at the bottom, we've got a Q&A module that is about a different topic. But let's do the math. That's 12 photos and 19 faces. I'm gonna move myself out of the way a little bit. 12 photos and 19 faces. Okay, so that's good. Could we get more though, right? So looking at this, what if you adjusted it to have more mods, creating more photo boxes, more dynamic content modules, and more content? Sometimes we need to do this. Sometimes our topics are about homecoming. We have so much we need to cover that we really need to jam-pack some more information into there. And you can do that without losing the integrity of your spread. So let's talk about the first dominant element in the center. Could that cover more than the people who were in that photo around the lab table? Yeah, you could break it down and make this dominant element be almost like a collage, but it's really a color blocking option with photos, with quotes, with a sub-story, and having it have multiple photos about different students. You've now increased that by 12. You've added 12 more people to this spread just by taking your dominant element and breaking it down. What if we took this one photo over here of this boy who's dripping stuff in for chemistry, and we break it down even further into 3 photos? You may think, oh my gosh, that's getting really small, but probably not. Those photos are probably an inch wide once they're printed. Our yearbook is bigger than it looks. So give it a chance and try it. And then we can always print it out. And if it looks too small, we can increase size. But now you've taken it and you've covered 3 different people or 3 different photos, and you've added even more. taking that story and breaking it down even further. Because let's be honest, who really wants to read a story, right? Changing it into an alternative coverage and breaking it down even by adding two more people, you've now increased it by 8 photos and 19 more faces by adding mods. And that's a pretty jam-packed spread, but it's not overwhelming either. You still are drawn in with the headline and the subheadline. You're drawn in with the dominant element, and you really want to read more and more about each of these mods. So when you're working with this, use alternative variations for your layout and rearrange the content modules. Mix and match where you put things. Change colors, add photos, put the story back in. You can still use one big photo if it's a really great photo and covers enough students and really just drives it home. We've had spreads where there's one person in the background, but it's an amazing photo that we wanted to highlight. Because you see, as you move through, coverage is king. And what's really important is that as you do this, people want to see themselves. And the more people you cover, the better your yearbook will be and the more people will buy it.